the LA Country Club, before the bridge game, we used to have lunch. The four or five of us used to have lunch together. And I was sitting one time, lunch, and Rick and Charlie were sitting directly in front of me, right? So there were just three of us because the other guys hadn't shown up yet. And I'm like saying, is this surreal or what? Okay. These two guys sitting. So I'd ask them, hey, listen, tell me about some of the interesting stories of the deals you guys did together in the 60s. Right. And then they would start laughing and they would tell me about these deals. And if you want, I'll just tell you one quick story that came out there, which is it's hilarious. So they used to look at stocks and businesses, different things to buy, whatever. There was this very, very small company in LA where this entrepreneur had come up with a fluid that you could put into your car engine and it would automatically stop all leaks. So if there was a leak, it would just plug the leak. And this guy, he was like a maverick kind of CEO. He used to go to like different auto mechanic shops and whatever with his gun. And he would with his own car, he would open the engine and he'd shoot the gun at the engine and he'd blow a hole in the engine. Then he'd pour his liquid and suddenly there's nothing being leaked. Okay. So that's how the guy built sales. Okay. That was his approach to building sales, the ultimate demo, right? So anyway, what happens is that this guy he passed away and the company actually was upside down. There was more debt than equity and so on. So Munger and Rick wanted to buy this company. What they did is they bought all the bank debt at like pennies on the dollar, and they effectively had control. And they could have taken because the equity was basically worthless. But they wanted to be fair and more than fair to the estate. So the guy had a mistress, and his wife did not know that there was a mistress till he had passed away. Okay. The mistress was a blonde with well endowed breasts, and she was a nurse. Okay. Pretty young. Okay. So, what this guy did is in his will, he made the wife the executor of the estate. But in the will, he gave quite a bit of money to the mistress.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you got one woman controlling the distribution and all of that, and the mistress having some money coming, and the wife was so pissed off. I mean, she was beyond pissed off. She was like, first she was grieving and then she was very upset. In the meantime, Charlie and Rick don't want to just take the company. They want to make some payment to the wife and the mistress and get them to sign over saying, okay, yeah, we agree with the deal and all that. Just they wanted to make it like a friendly deal. Neither of them wants to sign on anything with the other person. They're both upset with the other person. So Charlie's saying that he's trying to kind of get these two women to see the light that, listen, yeah, I know you're upset and all that, but look, there's a little bit of money that's coming to you. What do you care if there's some going to the other person? All this is already done. The guy's already dead, and this is reality, and we need to move on. So he arranged to meet the mistress at the California Club. The California Club is kind of like a lunch club in downtown LA, very ornate. It's like one of these, old money clubs, whatever. The first time I met Charlie, I met him at the California Club. It has a very ornate dining room, like huge 40-foot ceilings with Michelangelo type art on the top and all that. So Charlie invited the mistress over for lunch so that he could, schmooze her and talk to her and calm her down. So she came directly from work. And so she came here in a nurse's uniform. And the nurse's uniform was about 3 sizes too small. Okay. And so Charlie's saying, I'm sitting at my usual table at the California Club with this blonde with well-endowed breasts, where, in his words, there were tits everywhere. The rest of the members in the club, I mean, they're aghast. Like, what's going on? Mr. Munger is one of our esteemed members. And apparently he's meeting a porn star. Okay. for lunch. Anyway, Charlie said he was able to pacify the women. They were able to get them to just be cooperative enough to get their deal done. And then they moved on. So this is what went on at the lunch and bridge games. What can I say?
Amazing. That's so funny. So I guess you've had the time to talk to Warren, to talk to Charlie, be friends with him. Alejo, why don't you ask Monish the question about how he analyzes companies?
Yeah, Monish, one question I wanted to ask you is a little technical, but I think is important. And is how do you read an annual report? Like, is your like schedule? Like, you go to the business session, then you read the risk, and how do you draw your circle of competence, like to pick what annual reports to read on?
Well, I think as far as circular competence goes, to ask the question is to answer it. So if you are wondering whether something is within your circle of competence or not, the answer is it is not in your circle of competence. If something is within your circle of competence, you would know how to value the business, you would know how it makes money, you would know what is the likely trajectory of that business within some ranges and boundaries. So it depends on the business. So usually my most preferred starting point on a company is to see, as you know, I'm the shameless cloner, so the first thing I'm trying to ideally try to do is hopefully someone smarter than me already owns the stock, and hopefully they have made some comments about it. So the first thing I try to look for is who are the shareholders, and usually I don't need to look at the shareholders, because usually it is coming through some guy or some fund that I admire, and they have this particular company as a holding. It is ideal for me if there is a write up on Value Investors Club. So, there are thousands of write ups on Value Investors Club, and it's a pretty well curated site. So, when I find a company that's on my radar, the first thing I look for is, okay, is there a WIC write up? And even if the write ups are old, I will print off all the WIC write ups with all the messages and all the comments, everything on all the write ups. That's the first thing I want to read, because that is giving me a digested, condensed view of the business that would take a long time if I just sat and read the annual reports. This is someone who's already digested a lot of the data, and I can ratify that later, but at least it's giving me a head start. Because the first thing I'm trying to do is, anytime I'm looking at a business, I'm looking for a reason to stop looking and take a pass. So the WIC write-ups are designed to help me get to a point where I say, no, I thought this might be interesting, but it's not that interesting, so I can let it go. If I get past the WIC write-ups and I'm still interested, usually if the company is giving us letters to shareholders, and it appears that those letters to shareholders are not written by a PR firm, then not the entire annual report. I'll have my assistant just make a PDF of all the 20 years of letters, 20, 30 years of letters, starting with the oldest one. And then I just read the letters, because then I can say, okay, what were they saying in 95? And then what happened by 2000? What were they saying in 2000? What happened by 2005? I can just see kind of what they were saying versus how the trajectory of the business has gone subsequently. The other interesting thing about reading these letters is, especially reading them in the past, for example, we know that in 08, 09, a tsunami is coming. We know that. So when I'm reading the 2005 letter or 2006 letter or 2007 letter, they don't know that, right? But I know that. So it's like you're about to go off the cliff down the waterfall, but you don't know that. Then they're in the waterfall, and then they're finally at the bottom. So you can see that whole thing play out in the letter. So that kind of gives you a view how the company deals with, how resilient the business model is and the adversity. Same thing with the pandemic, right? We can see what 2018, 2019 looks like, and then suddenly the pandemic hits, and kind of it's throwing, some businesses are getting tailwinds and a lot of them are facing headwinds. If I am still interested in the business after reading the letters, then I go to the transcripts. So now the transcripts can be a little bit more, it's actually definitely not written by a PR firm, right? Because this is actually investors and analysts asking questions and so on and so forth. So I'm not that interested in the prepared remarks in the transcript, because that will be similar to what's in the reports and the annual reports, because they're controlling that messaging. But especially the companies that don't write their own letters, etc., I'm really interested in the Q&A. And of course, I have to sift through stuff because the analysts will ask some stupid question about next quarter. Do you expect to beat by 1 penny or 2 pennies, and that sort of thing, which is not really relevant. But what I'm looking for is, when different questions are being asked about the business and they're making different comments, I have the full future in front of me, and just how did that unfold? Did they under promise and over deliver, or did they over promise and under deliver, or are they conservative? Are they aggressive? Those sorts of things. We can then look at the proxies, because that gives me a good feel for the stock dilution and comp plans and all of that, how that is playing out. And then after all of that, if I'm still interested, then we start plowing into the financials and different parts of the annual report, risk factors, and so on. So that's usually the journey.
Do you talk to managers at all of companies?
For the longest time, I didn't talk to managers. Now, especially the ones that are not in the US, basically would not invest without having had plenty of interaction with the senior management, CEO, and so on. If it's a large US company, there's not that much you're going to glean. And also the availability they will not be very accessible to you. So you might be able to get to the IR department of some of the large companies, but may not be able to get beyond. Maybe you get to the CFO and so on. I would say that one of our investments is Micron. I've met Sanjay and I've had some interaction with their CFO and so on, but I think all of that was really irrelevant to the thesis.
Let's talk about Micron. How much of your portfolio does Micron weight?
It used to be a lot larger, but due to our drop in prices in 2022, well, it might still be similar proportions, but I would say, I mean, I think at one point, Micron was around 20% of the pie, 25% of the pie. It may be a little bit less right now just because things have come down a bit.
Can you tell us what are you seeing in Micron, for example, that makes you invest 25% of your money in one single company?
Well, we didn't invest 10%. We have a 10% limit on what we are willing to invest in a single business. So it became higher because it appreciated. But I am going to duck that question, and I'm going to probably duck a lot of questions related to what we currently own or what we're looking to buy and so on. So I will take a pass on that. At some point, we won't own Micron. We can then discuss it freely. But right now, I'll just take a pass.
So something super interesting to me, Buffett talks a lot about this, is the concept of inheritance. I heard you are not going to leave your inheritance to Monson and your other kid. Can you talk a little about that?
Buffett says that large inheritances do more harm than good. So I think he has a quote. He says, if you are Jesse Owens' son, Jesse Owens was a sprinter who ran the Olympics in Germany in front of Hitler. He's saying, if you're Jesse Owens' son, you're not going to become a great sprinter by starting 100-meter dashes at the 40-meter line. That's not going to make you a great sprinter. He says it's okay to put Jesse Owens' son at the 10-meter line. Maybe not at 0, but 10 is okay, but not 40. So I think if you were to give some boost to your gene pool, that may be helpful. But if you gave them, a very large amount where they don't have to work for the rest of their lives, it's like an IV drip in their arm, he considers that the same as people on welfare. The trust fund babies, as he calls them, basically the same as people who are welfare, food stamp recipients, and so on. So I agree with that. I think that my journey has been very exciting. In fact, I think one of the best things that happened to me was that my father went bankrupt many times, but he went bankrupt when I was 20 in college. If I wasn't clear about it then, I was very clear about it that time, that there was